Hey, my name's Dan, and I have been interested lately in using generative AI to sort of build some sort of subsidiary 3D models for my 3D designs. I've been doing architectural work in FreeCAD, and I want to be able to essentially use generative AI, such as, ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that, whichever your model of choice is, to do sort of the modeling of like toilets and bathroom vanities and bathtubs and beds and end-side tables and kitchen sinks that I could then use to sort of populate my architectural design. They're not important per se for the design because I may not go with a specific bathtub. I don't know that yet, but I want to be able to get the sort of the walls in the house arranged in such a way that it makes sense. So I installed the CadQuery FreeCAD Workbench because I discovered the CadQuery was essentially an off-the-shelf, already tested model that just uses Python to do 3D model development. And there's already a workbench that pulls that in FreeCAD. But when I installed it, I found it did not work the way I expected or the way I wanted it to work. So I've created a fork of CadQuery FreeCAD Workbench, and this video is my attempt to sort of demonstrate what I did different, why I did that, and to get feedback from the CadQuery FreeCAD Workbench developers and CadQuery FreeCAD Workbench users and other FreeCAD users on whether or not this is a reasonable approach, and should we move forward, adopt it, abandon it, whatever. So let's get into it. So this version of FreeCAD is a moderately recent dev build. It's August 20th, weekly build, and I've got my fork loaded of the CadQuery Workbench. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file to sort of demonstrate how this works. You'll see I've got under the CadQuery menu, there's a Create CadQuery feature, and then also under there's a button, a toolbar for that does the same thing. And if I come in here under Tree View, that will have created a CadQuery feature. Right? So a first class object, but I also got a little pop-up that said it's frozen skipping execution, right? So I've no geometry has been generated. So if you look at the properties, in the property view under the data for that object, code URL is blank, source mode is frozen. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to paste in a URL under code URL. It's an HTTPS URL, and it points back to the GitHub repo where I put the code as under docs, right? So it's docs example box.py. And if I hit enter, it does nothing because the source mode is still set as frozen. So we're going to change that to URL, and bam, it's created a box, right? 10 by 10 by 5 rectilinear parallel pipette. And what it's done is it's reached out to that URL, pulled in that code, executed it as code query code, and then created 3D geometry. All right, that's kind of cool. So that's kind of more what I thought it should do. But like, I'm really interested in how do I do parametric design. So let's create a var set, and we're going to set the variable len to be, let's say, 50 millimeters in that var set, right? So we got this down here, var set 50, and if I come back into here, so I want to be able to edit this code. Now, right now, the source mode is set to be URL. That means it's always going to try to pull the most, every time it tries to execute and rebuild this model, it's going to pull the source mode, the source code from that URL. But if I click on this button here that says Edit Code Query Cache, it's also under the menu, and it's also available in the context menu. That is going to take and save that local code cache. It's already like pulled that originally when I first gave it a URL. It made a copy of it as a code as a cache local copy, embedded that in the FreeCAD file, and now it saves that to a local file using the standard Python OS operating system temporary file right? Creates a temp file, puts the code in that, and then opens that in FreeCAD's embedded Python editor. So I can come in here and I can say, okay, instead of being 10 by 10 by 5, I want it to be len by 10 by 5. And then I need to link the parameter source with that var set. And then once I've done that, if I go into this var set and oops, it says 50. Oh, it did not work. Cancel. So one of the things I have to do is I have to save that file, close it. I think if I save it or I close it, of course I close it, it'll prompt me to save it if it's not been saved. And then that's updated the code, and the code is now referencing this var set. So every variable that's defined in the var set has now been imported into the execution context of the CadQuery code, so that those are available. And if anything, that shows up here in the report view, right? It says shows the expression engine. It actually pulls a couple extra things too, but here it says the loaded var set param length equals 50. So before var sets were a thing, I was using spreadsheets. So that's available also. If we go in here and we create a spreadsheet, we're going to sort of new spreadsheet. Every alias in here. So what I already had this, and so if I say length, and that we're going to make that 100 millimeters, and then I've got an alias here that's called aliaser that just automatically sets an alias, right? So if I look over here on alias, that's going to be equal to length. And if I come back to my FreeCAD object and I set the parameter source, instead of being var set to being that spreadsheet, and then I look back, oh, now instead of being 50 millimeters wide, it's 100 millimeters wide. And essentially it's using that. And of course, in the spreadsheet, you can set all sorts of things where, like, I can do calculations, and I could even set this equal to the var set. I could set length, spreadsheet.length to be equal varset.length. And then if I come back here, now it's only 50 millimeters wide. So I can sort of use the standard formula calculations available in FreeCAD to drive parametrically a CadQuery object. So one of the things that is really troubling about this approach, and I'm sure some of you in the comments are screaming that this is a horrible security issue with respect to portable code, because those Python modules, the Python code that's executing in the context of CadQuery, is now being embedded in my FreeCAD objects. And if I load this object, that code could do fucking anything. Pardon my language. So what I did to address this, and we're going to go in here and we're going to save as, and we'll call it code query. I don't know why I have caps lock on. Code query. Typing is hard today. Demo. And so I'm going to go ahead and close this. If anything, let's go ahead and just completely quit FreeCAD, and then we'll start it back up. It works. It should work either way, but give it a second. It's starting up. The splash screen is starting somewhere else. All right. So here's the code query demo in my recent files. We'll go ahead and open that. And if you look down here in the messages box, it says execution of that code query feature or CAD query feature is deferred pending security check. And then it says for security, the following CAD query features were set to frozen on load CAD query feature. And essentially, then I forget whatever the third thing it said was, like, if you want to change that, go ahead and change it. Oh, to re-enable, go in and change its source mode from frozen to Kugoro cache. So if I come in here and I select this object, what it's showing me is the brep, the boundary representation that was sort of binary object, a three-dimensional model of that box, and the source mode is frozen. So it's no longer, when I load this file, it has automatically gone through and found every CadQuery feature object and set its source mode to be frozen so that the object is available in the exact same geometry that it was available when it was saved. But it will not recompute that object until the user consciously goes in and makes the decision to change the source mode back to cache, essentially rerun it, which will then rerun the code as it exists in the saved file. Or you could, and so that's, in this case, changes nothing. It's sort of just where I left off. But I could also go back and I could change it to URL, in which case, as soon as I do that, that's still now going to go back and repull from the, in this case, the GitHub repo where the box is 10 by 10 by 5. So that's the approach that I've taken for security purposes, to say, look, I don't want to be do not want to sort of create a situation where a user could create a FreeCAD model with malicious code embedded into it, then send that to somebody else. There's still a risk that but essentially that risk is mitigated by them having to every time go in and change the mode of the embedded objects. So if a naive user comes in and they just load a file, it's going to work and it's going to get the same three-dimensional geometry that the previous user who emailed that file to them or saved that file on a website, wherever they downloaded it from, used. They are not going to rerun the Python code. That is precluded. It's actually got essentially, until the security check runs, it will not execute any CadQuery code. And then once that the security check runs, what it does is it changes every object to change the source mode to frozen so that it will not run that code until object by object the user goes in and explicitly says, hey, I want to actually modify this object, either by editing the code embedded in the file, or I just want to go back and it's been edited out already on the web. My vision was that people would be using GitHub or Git somehow to be the repository of where these 3D models are, and that we could just sort of reference those things. And if you wanted to pull down the latest and greatest version, fine. If you go in and you change the source mode to URL, that it will automatically pull that down. But if you just open the file, it's not going to screw with it, right? So that's the overall demo of my proposed fork to the CadQuery FreeCAD Workbench. And I'm soliciting sort of feedback on if this is useful, if it has security issues that I haven't thought through, or if this should be the new baseline, or if it's just sort of an option that we should make it be a fork. So thanks for taking the time to listen, and I hope you're having a great day and a great FreeCAD experience. Thanks. Ciao.